So I think we have been getting leadership wrong since we were 6 years old, and I think I can show you where it starts. Picture this classroom. The teacher says, "Okay, I need a leader for this group," and every head turns to the same kid. Neat handwriting, good grades, always raises her hand, never talks back. Let's call her Jessie, okay? Jessie gets picked. Jessie always gets picked. And here's the question nobody in that room ever asks. What exactly did Jessie just get picked for? Because I don't think it was leadership. I think it was obedience. And I think we've been quietly confusing the two things our entire lives. That confusion doesn't stay in the classroom. It follows Jessie into her first job, into her first promotion, into the meeting where she becomes your boss. So let me walk you through how a 6-year-old's gold star turns into a grown adult's authority, and why the person who ends up in charge is so often the wrong one. But not because anyone in this story is evil. That was the part that actually got me. There's actually no villain in this story. Let's get into it. First question. When we pick leaders young, what are we actually rewarding? You would hope it's judgment, curiosity, right? The nerve to ask the hard question. Now, ask any teacher and they'll tell you they love an independent, creative kid. And they mean it. But there's a study I can't stop thinking about. Westby and Dawson, 1995. They asked elementary school teachers to describe their favorite student and their least favorite student. Then they lined up the descriptions against the traits psychologists actually linked to creativity. And the results were almost funny. Teachers liked the polite, obedient kids the most. But the creative, naughty kids, teachers liked them the least. And here's the wild part. The teachers had no idea they were doing it. Ask them straight in the face and they'll tell you they love creativity. They just didn't seem to like it when it was actually sitting in front of them. So the very first scoreboard we ever put a kid on, it isn't measuring leadership at all. It's measuring who's easier to manage. Okay, but hold on. Maybe that's fine, right? Maybe the well-behaved kids really are the ones who go on to run the world. So if that were true, if obedience really was the leadership trait, how would we know? We would expect the compliant kid to come out on top later on in life, right? And the rule breakers, the ones who argue with the teacher, to fall behind. So somebody actually checked. In 2015, they followed 745 people for 40 years, from age 12 all the way to age 52. And what they found was the opposite of what you would expect. The single strongest childhood predictor of higher income at 52, after you control for IQ, after you control for how rich your parents were, was actually rule-breaking and defiance of parental authority. Let me say that again. The kid who questioned the rules, the one who wouldn't just fall in line, on average, that kid out-earned Jessie. So the thing schools punish you for, asking why, pushing back, is the very thing the real world quietly pays you for. So what is school actually teaching underneath the math and the spelling? There's actually an old idea for this, and it's called the hidden curriculum. And it's simple. Sit down when you're told, speak only when you are called on, don't question the schedule, do the task whether or not it makes any sense. Officially, schools teach you to think, but underneath it, it's running a 12-year-old program in doing what you're told. And the kids who ace this program, we pin the badge on them and call them leaders. Okay, so Jessie grows up and she's good at her job. Because of course she is, right? She spent her whole life being excellent at the assigned task. So she gets promoted, and this is where it starts costing real money. Benson and Lee in 2019 looked at about 40,000 salespeople across 131 companies. The firms almost always promoted the best salespeople into management. Makes sense, right? Reward your top performers, except that those star salespeople became measurably worse managers. Their team's performance dropped by around 30%. We took the person who was brilliant at one job and handed them a completely different job we never actually trained them for. And who gets picked for such a promotion? It's not the careful person who says, let me think about it. It's the confident one who says, I know exactly what to do, regardless of whether they actually know what they are doing. And there's a whole meta-analysis on this. Narcissism is strongly linked to becoming a leader and basically unrelated to being any good at it. That's why I really hate interviews. So the official story is, we promoted the best. But the real story is, we promoted the most obedient and the most confident. Two completely different things wearing the same word. Now you might be thinking, fine, this is just a small company problem, right? Surely at the very top, at a real giant company, the truth gets through. So let me tell you about what happened at Nokia. Researchers interviewed 76 people inside the company, top brass, middle managers, engineers, trying to figure out what happened at the biggest phone maker on earth at that time, and how it just lost. And it wasn't that they missed the iPhone, They saw it coming. The problem was nobody wanted to say it out loud. Middle managers were frightened of their bosses. So when the news was bad, they softened it. Or they just didn't send it up at all. Which meant that the people at the very top, the ones making the billion-dollar bets, were working off a rosy picture that wasn't real. A whole company full of people trained since childhood not to be the one who says, "This is broken." Everyone inside Nokia could see the iPhone was going to crush them. They just couldn't say it to the boss. So Nokia did nothing. And it kept making their old phones and lost almost its entire business in about 5 years. That's the obedience machine at full size. The boss literally cannot see or hear the truth. So why does this keep happening everywhere at every level? Here's the mechanism, and it's almost boringly simple. Every manager has one real customer, the person directly above them. Your raise, your promotion, your job security, that comes from up there, not from your team down here. So of course, what's the safe move? Keep the person above you happy and pass the pressure down. Do that a few thousand times across the organization, and what you get is what we politely call bureaucracy. A tower of people, each serving the one above them, and almost nobody serving the actual point. And here's what makes it so hard to fix. Nobody chose it. The teacher who picked Jessie was picked the exact same way. Your worst boss had a boss just like them. You lead the way you were led. It isn't a conspiracy of bad people. It's a system quietly making copies of itself. So if grades, confidence, and obedience don't test leadership, so then what does? Here's the cleanest test I know, and it has nothing to do with an office. Give someone almost total power over a person who can't fight back, can't quit, and can't report them, and then watch what they do. We actually run this experiment constantly, and we call it becoming a parent. One person holds nearly all the power. The other can only adapt. Strip away the title and the salary, and that's the moment you'll find out who someone really is. Do they protect the person who can't protect themselves? Or do they use them? And a workplace, quietly, is the same test. Yes, technically your employee can quit, but can they really? With rent to pay, a mortgage, a kid at home, most people are trapped. And a bad boss knows that. Real leadership shows up exactly where someone can't easily walk away. So, is it hopeless? Are we doomed to be run by whoever is the best at obeying? No. And here's the story that changed my mind. When Alan Mueli took over Ford in 2006, the company was about to lose $17 billion. Hear that again, $17 billion. And every week, his executives presented status reports, color-coded, green for fine, red for trouble, and every single slide from every single executive came up green. Hear that? A company bleeding out on paper, everything's perfect. Why? Because in the old Ford, if you showed red, you got punished. So nobody ever did show red. Until one man, Mark Fields, finally turned a slight red. This time a real production problem had occurred. And by his own account, he sat there thinking, I'm about to be fired. And Mueli clapped. In the meeting, he said, "Thank you for the transparency, Mark. Now, what can we all do to help?" That's it. That's the whole turning point. The next week, a few more red slides. The week after, more. And Ford started actually fixing its problems. Because for the first time, people could say them out loud. Mueli didn't have better data than the people at running Nokia. He just made it safer to tell the truth. He rewarded the exact behavior the whole system spent 18 years training out of us. And that's the thing I want you to walk away with. Good leaders do exist. Good companies do exist too. But look closely and you'll notice that they almost never happen because the system found the right person. They happen despite it. because somebody near the top decided, on purpose, to reward the kid whose hand was up and saying, I don't think this is working. That's how rare real leadership is. We built an entire pipeline, classroom to boardroom, that selects for obedience and calls it leadership, and then we act surprised when those people in charge cannot lead. They were never chosen for that. They were chosen for staying in line. The writer Robert Caro spent his whole life studying powerful men, and it left him with one sentence: power doesn't always corrupt, but power always reveals. So the next time you're trying to spot a real leader in the room, don't watch who's climbing. Watch how they treat the people who can't do a single thing for them. That's the tell. That's the whole game.